Each year, military aviation units around the world log thousands of flight hours in some of the most extreme and hostile environments imaginable, pushing both aircraft and human endurance to their absolute limits in the name of national security and strategic reconnaissance. It happens so frequently that the United States Air Force alone maintains classified databases containing over 14 million individual flight records, with dedicated intelligence analysts spending their entire careers reviewing cockpit recordings, radar data, and pilot debriefings for anomalies that don't fit conventional explanations. The Cold War era between 1947 and 1991 saw American strategic reconnaissance aircraft complete an estimated 87,000 classified missions over Soviet and Warsaw-packed territories, with the legendary SR-71 Blackbird serving as the crown jewel of this espionage, capable of flying at speeds exceeding Mach 3.2 and altitudes above 85,000 feet, where the sky turns black and the curvature of Earth becomes visible to the naked eye. For a brief period during the winter of 1987, specifically between January and March, one particular Blackbird crew stationed at Beale Air Force Base in California would encounter something at the edge of space that would fundamentally challenge everything the United States military understood about physics, atmospheric phenomena, and the very nature of what shares the skies with our most advanced aircraft. But what exactly was the intelligence that Strategic Air Command ordered, completely erased from all official records within 72 hours of the mission's completion? And why did both crew members of that SR-71 spend the remaining decades of their lives under constant surveillance by Air Force Office of Special Investigations, with strict orders never to discuss what they witnessed during those 17 minutes of missing flight recorder data over the Barents Sea? The Barents Sea represents one of the most strategically critical and environmentally hostile regions on the planet, covering approximately 542,473 square miles of frigid Arctic waters between northern Norway, the Russian coastline, and the Svalbard archipelago. During winter months, temperatures in this region routinely plunge to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, with pack ice extending hundreds of miles in every direction and creating a frozen wasteland where human survival without proper equipment measures in minutes rather than hours. The area sits directly above some of the Soviet Union's most sensitive military installations, including the massive Northern Fleet submarine base at Severomorsk and the closed city of Olenja Guba, where nuclear weapons were stored in underground facilities carved into solid granite mountains. The extreme latitude means that during January and February, this region experiences near total darkness for weeks at a time, with only brief periods of twilight breaking the endless polar night. The combination of Soviet air defense systems, brutal weather conditions, and the electromagnetic interference caused by aurora borealis activity made this one of the most dangerous places on Earth for American reconnaissance aircraft to operate. It is perhaps unsurprising, then, that this frozen intersection of geopolitical tension and natural extremes would become the setting for encounters that military intelligence analysts still struggle to categorize decades after the Cold War's end. Long before modern military aircraft ever penetrated these skies, the indigenous Sami people, who inhabited the northernmost regions of Scandinavia and Russia, documented strange phenomena in their oral histories and sacred texts dating back over 2,000 years. They referred to these occurrences as Guvsahas, which roughly translates to lights that think, or the aurora with consciousness, describing luminous entities that would descend from the northern lights themselves and observe human activities with what appeared to be deliberate intelligence and purpose. Ancient Sami shamans recorded in their Joik song poems that these entities appeared most frequently during the darkest months of polar night, manifesting as geometric patterns of light that moved in ways that defied natural atmospheric behavior, sometimes pursuing hunters across the tundra or circling Sami camps for hours before ascending back into the shimmering curtains of aurora overhead. Medieval Norse sagas from the 13th century, particularly the Konungs, Skogsja or King's Mirror, contain remarkably similar descriptions of what the Vikings called Himmelbrand or Skyfire that demonstrated unmistakable signs of awareness and intentional movement completely distinct from normal aurora borealis displays. Russian Orthodox monks stationed at remote monasteries on the Kola Peninsula during the 16th and 17th centuries documented in their illuminated manuscripts what they termed, or divine watchers, celestial phenomena that would hover above the frozen landscape and seem to study human settlements with searchlight-like beams of coherent light that could not possibly exist in that era of human technology. These historical accounts, scattered across multiple cultures and spanning thousands of years, all describe the same basic characteristics that would later appear in classified military reports. The United States military's own files contain numerous reports of unusual encounters in Arctic airspace that predate the 1987 incident by several decades, though most remain classified to this day under provisions of national security. In August 1952, a formation of 3 B-29 Superfortress bombers conducting a training exercise near Thule Air Base in Greenland reported being paced by multiple spherical objects that maintained perfect formation with the aircraft for over 40 minutes, matching every altitude change and course correction with impossible precision before accelerating vertically and disappearing from radar at speeds estimated above 9,000 miles per hour. The incident was documented in Project Blue Book files, but was quickly reclassified when analyzing officers noted that the objects had demonstrated clear awareness of the bomber's flight path changes several seconds before the pilots actually executed the maneuvers, suggesting some form of precognition or advanced signal intelligence capability beyond any known Soviet technology. During Operation Chrome Dome in 1966, multiple B-52 Stratofortress crews on nuclear deterrent patrols over the Arctic Circle filed reports through Strategic Air Command channels describing encounters with what pilots consistently termed intelligent light formations that would emerge from aurora displays and approach the bombers at high altitude, sometimes causing temporary navigation system failures and radio interference that matched no known pattern of Soviet electronic warfare. A particularly detailed report from February 1968 documented a KC-135 Stratotanker refueling mission that was aborted when the entire crew observed a massive disc-shaped concentration of light, estimated at over 300 feet in diameter, that positioned itself directly above the aircraft at 35.0 feet and remained stationary relative to the plane for nearly 20 minutes before dematerializing, in a sequence the radar operator described as the object inverting into itself like a dimensional fold. Similar encounters were reported by Strategic Air Command reconnaissance crews with such disturbing frequency that by 1970, the Air Force had established a classified sub-project under the code name Olympic Torch, specifically to collect and analyze reports of anomalous phenomena encountered during missions above the Arctic Circle, with standing orders that any crew experiencing such events was to maintain radio silence and report only through secure channels after landing. February 17, 1987, 0347 hours Zulu time, the SR-71 Blackbird designated its tail number 17 to 980 lifted off from Beale Air Force Base in California, carrying a two-man crew on what mission planners had designated as a routine strategic reconnaissance flight over the Barents Sea and Soviet Northern Fleet installations. The pilot in command was Major Thomas Ironside Kellerman, a 15-year Air Force veteran with over 400 flight hours in the SR-71 and a reputation among Blackbird crews as one of the most unshakable pilots in the entire reconnaissance community, known for maintaining ice-cold composure even when Soviet MiG interceptors were launching missiles at his aircraft from below. In the rear cockpit sat Captain Vincent Hargrove Calsine, prophet a reconnaissance systems officer with a PhD in astrophysics from MIT, who had transferred to Air Force Intelligence specifically to work on the Blackbird program, responsible for operating the aircraft's sophisticated sensor suite and maintaining communication with ground stations during the mission. The flight plan called for Kellerman and Hargrove to conduct a high-altitude pass over Soviet installations at 78.00 feet, well above the operational ceiling of any Soviet interceptor aircraft, with the mission expected to last approximately 6 hours, including the refueling rendezvous with a KC-135 tanker over the Norwegian Sea. As the Blackbird climbed through 60,000 feet and accelerated past Mach 2.8, both crew members were focused on pre-positioning checks and systems verification, standard procedure for the critical phase of penetrating Soviet radar coverage. The temperature outside the aircraft's titanium skin measured negative 67 degrees Fahrenheit, and through the small cockpit windows, Kellerman could see the first faint green shimmer of Aurora Borealis beginning to form along the northern horizon as they approached the polar region. Everything appeared completely nominal until Hargrove noticed something unusual on his defensive systems display at 0521 hours, approximately 43 minutes into the flight. The radar warning receiver was showing an intermittent contact at their exact altitude and distance of 12 miles directly ahead, but the signature didn't match any known Soviet tracking radar or fire control system in the classified threat library. The contact would appear for 3 to 4 seconds, disappear completely, then reappear in a slightly different position, always maintaining the same relative bearing to their aircraft, despite the Blackbird's speed of over 2,100 miles per hour. Kellerman reduced throttle slightly and began a gentle turn to starboard standard, evasive protocol when encountering unknown radar contacts in hostile airspace, expecting the mysterious signature to either fall behind or reveal itself as a glitch in the defensive systems. Instead, the contact matched their turn precisely, maintaining the exact same 12-mile separation and relative position, as if whatever was out there was connected to the Blackbird by an invisible tether. Hargrove cycled through different radar modes and double-checked the equipment calibration, finding everything operating within normal parameters, which made the impossible contact even more disturbing, because it meant something was actually out there in the thin atmosphere at the edge of space. At 0524 hours, both crew members simultaneously witnessed what Kellerman would later describe in his classified debriefing as a geometric impossibility manifesting in physical space. Directly ahead of the aircraft, emerging from the curtain of green and violet aurora borealis that filled the northern sky, a massive formation of light began to materialize with a luminosity that was clearly not auroral in nature. The formation consisted of 7 distinct points of brilliant white light, arranged in a perfect hexagonal pattern, with a 7th point at the center. Each individual light source appearing to be roughly the size of a C-130 cargo aircraft and pulsing with a rhythmic intensity that Hargrove's instruments measured at exactly 1.7 hertz. The hexagonal formation began rotating slowly, perhaps 1 full revolution, every 30 seconds, and as it rotated, the crew could see that each point of light was casting impossibly sharp shadows against the aurora behind it, shadows that shouldn't exist in the diffuse glow of atmospheric luminescence. The temperature inside the cockpit, which was normally regulated to a steady 72 degrees Fahrenheit by the aircraft's environmental control system, suddenly dropped by 18 degrees and less, then 10 seconds, causing both men's breath to become visible in white clouds despite the pressurized and climate-controlled environment. Every electromagnetic system on the aircraft began experiencing interference simultaneously, with the defensive systems display erupting in cascading error. Messages the inertial navigation system, showing impossible position readings that placed them alternately over the North Pole and the equator, in the radio filling with a deep rhythmic pulsing sound that Hargrove described as similar to a human heartbeat, but pitched down several octaves below the range of normal human vocalization. The formation began to close distance, rapidly covering the 12 miles that separated them in approximately 40 seconds, which Kellerman calculated meant the objects were accelerating from a standing position to over 1,000 miles per hour without any visible means of propulsion or any sonic boom that should have been generated by such acceleration in the thin but still existent atmosphere at 78,000 feet. Kellerman made the instantaneous decision to execute a maximum performance descent, slamming both throttles forward to full afterburner and pushing the control stick forward into a 30-degree dive angle, knowing that the Blackbird could potentially outrun almost anything if they could build enough speed and get below the mysterious formation. The Pratt & Whitney J58 engines screamed as the aircraft accelerated past, Mach 3.1, the fastest either crew member had ever flown, with the airframe beginning to heat from atmospheric friction until the titanium skin was glowing a dull red that was visible even in the darkness. But the hexagonal formation matched their descent and acceleration without any apparent effort, positioning itself exactly 400 feet above the Blackbird's canopy and maintaining that precise separation despite the aircraft's violent maneuvering and speed that now exceeded 2,300 miles per hour. At 0527 hours, the central point of light in the formation suddenly intensified to a blinding white that completely overwhelmed Kellerman's night-adapted vision, and both crew members felt a sensation that Hargrove would later struggle to describe in his debriefing, comparing it to having your consciousness pulled upward out of your body like a fish being yanked from water by an invisible line. The sensation lasted approximately 4 seconds, during which both men reported experiencing an overwhelming certainty that they were being studied, examined, measured by an intelligence so vastly different from human cognition that even attempting to understand its perspective induced a kind of existential vertigo. When the light intensity decreased back to its previous level and the pulling sensation ceased, Kellerman discovered that they had lost over 19,000 feet of altitude without any conscious memory of the descent, and the aircraft's clock showed that 7 minutes had elapsed, even though both crew members would have sworn under oath that only 4 seconds had passed. The flight data recorder, which continuously logged every system parameter and control input, showed a completely flat line for those 7 missing minutes, as if the aircraft had simply ceased to exist in normal spacetime before reappearing at a lower altitude. Most disturbing of all, when Hargrove checked the aircraft's fuel totalizer, they had consumed 8,200 pounds of JP-7 fuel that was completely unaccounted for by the recorded flight profile, meaning the Blackbird had been flying somewhere doing something for those missing 7 minutes that neither crew member could remember. The hexagonal formation of lights had vanished completely, leaving no trace on any sensor system, and the aurora borealis had returned to its normal diffuse glow as if nothing had ever disturbed the Arctic night. Kellerman immediately attempted to establish contact with their assigned ground control station at RAF Mildenhall in England, keying the radio transmitter multiple times and following standard emergency communication protocols, but received only dead silence across all assigned frequencies, despite the communications equipment showing normal operational status with full signal strength. Hargrove ran through emergency diagnostics on every system aboard the aircraft, pulling circuit breakers and resetting equipment according to the classified technical orders, memorized during months of intensive training, trying desperately to find some rational explanation for the missing time and the impossible fuel consumption that violated basic laws of thermodynamics. The inertial navigation system had finally stabilized and was now showing their position as APROXIMATEL, Y 340 miles north of their planned flight path, placing them deep inside Soviet territorial airspace over the Kara Sea, a location they absolutely should not have been able to reach given their recorded flight profile and fuel state when the encounter began. Both crew members maintained professional composure and focused on the immediate tactical problem of getting the aircraft safely out of hostile airspace. But Kellerman would later admit in his debriefing that he could feel his hands trembling inside his pressure suit gloves as he turned the Blackbird southwest toward the Norwegian coast. At 0534 hours, they finally established radio contact with an AWACS aircraft call sign, Wizard 07 operating over the Norwegian Sea, and the controller's voice carried an edge of poorly concealed panic when he asked Kellerman to authenticate his identity because, according to the AWACS radar, picture the SR-71 designated as tail number 17980 had completely disappeared from their scopes 41 minutes earlier and had been declared a possible loss with search and rescue assets already being scrambled. The controller demanded to know where they had been for the past 41 minutes, but Kellerman could only respond that they had experienced a systems malfunction and were declaring an emergency, requesting immediate clearance for the tanker rendezvous because their fuel state was now critically low, and they had maybe 30 minutes of flight time remaining before flameout. After what felt like the longest 90 minutes of their lives, Kellerman and Hargrove successfully rendezvoused with the KC-135 tanker, took on enough fuel to reach Beale Air Force Base and maintained complete radio silence about what they had experienced until they could be debriefed by the proper intelligence authorities upon landing. When they finally touched down at Beale 13 hours after takeoff, the aircraft was immediately towed into a secured hangar, and both crew members were separated and escorted to different debriefing rooms by officers from Air Force Office of Special Investigations who were already waiting on the flight, lying as if they had known something unusual had occurred. During his individual debriefing session that lasted over 7 hours, Hargrove was shown a series of classified documents that made his blood run cold as he realized the implications of what they had encountered. The documents were satellite reconnaissance photographs from a classified National Reconnaissance Office bird that had been tasked to monitor Soviet military installations in the Barents Sea region, but several images from early 1987 showed massive hexagonal patterns of disturbed snow and ice on the frozen surface below, each pattern measuring over 2 miles across and consisting of 7 distinct circles arranged in the exact same geometric configuration as the lights they had witnessed. The photographs were stamped with analysis notes from NRO specialists who had initially assessed the patterns as possible Soviet radar installations or signals intelligence arrays. But further investigation revealed that the patterns appeared and disappeared seemingly at random, sometimes lasting only a few hours before the snow would blow across them and erase all traces. An Air Force historian who specialized in Arctic phenomena was brought into Hargrove's debriefing and presented him with declassified portions of a 1943 German Kriegsmarine report that had been captured at the end of World War II, written by the commander of U-boat U-209 during a patrol near Novaya Zemlya. The U-boat commander described in clinical detail how his crew had witnessed from their surface position a formation of lights that emerged from Aurora Borealis and descended toward the frozen sea ice, where they arranged themselves in a hexagonal pattern before seeming to pull the submarine upward against gravity for several minutes, an experience that left 3 crew members catatonic and resulted in the U-boat's compass being permanently magnetized in the wrong direction. The report had been dismissed by Allied intelligence analysts as possible psychological warfare fabrication or the delusions of men who had spent too long underwater, but it had been filed away in the massive archive of captured German documents that military historians occasionally reviewed for any overlooked intelligence value. What made Hargrove's debriefing even more disturbing was when the AFOSI officers informed him that he and Kellerman were not the only crew who had experienced an encounter during the past 72 hours in that exact region of Arctic airspace. A Navy P-3 Orion maritime patrol aircraft operating out of Keflavik Air Base in Iceland had been conducting routine surveillance of Soviet submarine activity in the Barents Sea on February 15th, approximately 48 hours before the Blackbird incident, when the crew of 13 reported witnessing an identical hexagonal formation of lights at much lower altitude, around 18,000 feet. The P-3 crew had attempted to photograph the phenomenon using their specialized reconnaissance cameras, and the developed film showed something that should have been scientifically impossible. The lights appeared as solid geometric shapes rather than diffuse luminous sources, and in several frames, the hexagonal formation could be seen partially obscuring the stars behind it in a way that suggested physical mass rather than electromagnetic radiation. Even more unsettling, the P-3's magnetic anomaly detection equipment, normally used to locate submerged submarines by detecting distortions in Earth's magnetic field, had recorded a massive spike in local magnetic field strength measuring over 47,000 nanoteslas, approximately 100 times stronger than Earth's normal magnetic field and approaching the intensity found in industrial MRI machines. 3 of the P-3 crew members had reported severe nosebleeds during the encounter, and their flight engineer discovered after landing that several of his mechanical wristwatches had been completely demagnetized, while his ends quartz digital watch had stopped permanently at exactly 2,137 hours. Zulu, the moment the formation had appeared. The Navy crew had been immediately quarantined upon landing and subjected to extensive medical examinations that revealed elevated levels of ionizing radiation exposure, consistent with what nuclear weapons technicians might experience, despite the P-3 being nowhere near any radiation sources. By February 18th, less than 24 hours after Kellerman and Hargrove's encounter, Air Force intelligence analysts had identified a pattern of 6 additional incidents dating back to January 1987, involving various military aircraft operating over the Arctic Circle, all reporting similar geometric light formations, all experiencing missing time or navigation anomalies, and all occurring during periods of intense aurora borealis activity. The pattern was undeniable, systematic, and escalating in frequency, suggesting that whatever intelligence was behind these encounters had become significantly more active during the early months of 1987 for reasons that nobody in the American defense establishment could begin to understand. On February 23, 1987, exactly 6 days after Kellerman and Hargrove's encounter, Strategic Air Command made the catastrophic decision to launch another SR-71 reconnaissance mission over the same general area of the Barents Sea, this time with the crew specifically, briefed on the possibility of encountering anomalous phenomena, and equipped with additional sensor packages designed to record electromagnetic spectrum data across frequencies that standard reconnaissance equipment didn't monitor. The crew consisted of Lieutenant Colonel David Wraith, Buchanan, and Major Frank Scanner. Yazzie, both volunteers who had been read into the classified reports and understood they were essentially being used as bait to provoke another encounter under more controlled observation conditions. What Strategic Air Command planners and intelligence analysts failed to anticipate was that whatever intelligence operated those hexagonal formations had apparently been waiting for exactly this kind of response and was prepared to demonstrate capabilities far beyond anything witnessed in previous incidents. At 0419 hours Zulu time, as Buchanan and Yazzie crossed into the target area at 81,000 feet and Mach 3.0, their defensive systems displays erupted with contacts in a pattern that made Yazzie's blood freeze in his veins, because instead of a single hexagonal formation, there were now 7 identical formations appearing simultaneously at different altitudes, ranging from 45,000 feet to over 95,000 feet, creating a 3-dimensional geometric matrix that completely surrounded the Blackbird in all directions. Each formation consisted of the same 7 points of brilliant white light, and all 49 individual lights began pulsing in perfect synchronization at 1.7 Hertz, the exact same frequency that Hargrove had recorded during the previous encounter. The temperature inside the cockpit didn't just drop this time, but began fluctuating wildly between -20 degrees Fahrenheit and +110 degrees Fahrenheit every 8 seconds, cycling through a 70-degree temperature range that should have been Impossible given the aircraft's environmental systems, causing both crew members pressure suits to alternate between frost formation and heat stress within the same minute. Buchanan attempted to execute the same maximum performance dive that Kellerman had used, but discovered that the flight controls were responding with a noticeable delay of approximately 1.2 seconds between his stick input and the aircraft's actual movement, as if the Blackbird was flying through some medium far denser than the thin atmosphere at their altitude. Yazzi's voice over the intercom began taking on a quality that Buchanan had never heard from his reconnaissance systems officer in 3 years of flying together. A rising edge of genuine terror bleeding through the professional military bearing, as Yazzie reported that his instrument panel was displaying information that violated everything he understood about physics and reality. The radar altimeter, which measured distance to the ground using reflected radio waves, was showing their altitude as simultaneously 81,000 feet, 340 feet, and negative 12000 feet, all three readings appearing on the display at the same time in different colors, as if the aircraft existed at multiple altitudes concurrently. The outside air temperature gauge was fluctuating between readings that ranged from absolute zero to over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, temperatures that should have either frozen the aircraft into a brittle shell or vaporized it entirely, yet the titanium skin remained intact and the engines continued running normally. Most disturbing of all, Yazzie's navigational star tracker, which used positions of celestial bodies to verify the inertial navigation system, was showing star positions that didn't match any known stellar configurations, as if the constellations themselves had been rearranged or the aircraft had somehow been transported to a completely different region of space. Buchanan found his own thoughts becoming increasingly fragmented and difficult to control, experiencing intrusive visions of geometric patterns rotating through dimensions that human perception wasn't designed to process three-dimensional, objects that cast four-dimensional shadows and seemed to exist simultaneously in multiple states of being. His hands on the control stick felt like they belonged to someone else, and he caught himself speaking words in a language he didn't recognize, syllables that seemed to bypass his conscious mind entirely and emerge from some deeper level of cognition that responded to the pulsing lights with a kind of terrible recognition. The 7 hexagonal formations began contracting inward, reducing the distance between themselves and the Blackbird with methodical precision, closing from a separation of 12 miles to 8 miles to 4 miles over the course of 90 seconds. And as they approached, both crew members reported feeling an overwhelming sensation of multiple presences, observing them with an attention so focused and intense that it felt like being dissected by invisible scalpels that cut through flesh and bone and consciousness itself to examine whatever fundamental essence made them human. At 0427 hours, when the hexagonal formations had closed to within 800 feet of the aircraft, and the Blackbird was completely encased in a geometric cage of pulsing light, Buchanan made his final radio transmission to the AWACS controller, his voice remarkably calm given the circumstances, as he stated, "Wizard 07, Habu 62, we are experiencing multiple system failures and loss of aircraft control. We are," before the transmission cut off in mid-sentence and was replaced by a sound that the AWACS crew would later describe as similar to a choir, singing in harmonic frequencies too low and too high for normal human hearing to process completely. The SR-71's transponder signal vanished from every radar screen monitoring Arctic airspace, the aircraft simply ceasing to exist as far as electromagnetic detection was concerned, as if it had been cleanly removed from reality like a photograph cut out of its frame. On the ground at Beale Air Force Base, the mission commander monitoring the flight through satellite telemetry watched in horror as the data stream from the Blackbird sensors showed the aircraft's velocity increasing impossibly to over Mach 17, while simultaneously the altitude reading climbed through 200,000 feet, well into the vacuum of space where no air-breathing engine could possibly function, before all telemetry abruptly terminated with a final cryptic data packet that consisted of nothing but repeating hexadecimal code in a pattern that computer analysts would spend months trying to decrypt. Buchanan experienced those final moments as a sensation of the universe inverting. Around him, the inside becoming outside, and the outside collapsing inward. The 7 formations of light merging into a single point of impossible brightness that seemed to contain infinite depth and infinite darkness, simultaneously pulling him and Yazzie toward some threshold that his mind understood with absolute certainty they were never meant to cross. He could hear Yazzie screaming over the intercom, but the sound seemed to be coming from very far away and getting farther with each passing second, as if his reconnaissance systems officer was being stretched across some vast distance that had nothing to do with physical space. And Buchanan's last coherent thought before consciousness fragmented entirely was the terrible realization that they were not going to die, because what waited on the other side of that threshold of light was something far stranger and more permanent than death. The cockpit filled with luminescence so bright that it burned afterimages into Buchanan's retinas, even through his closed eyelids, and he felt the blackbird falling, plummeting through layers of reality that peeled away like the pages of a book being torn apart by hands. He couldn't see, but could sense surrounding the aircraft from directions that didn't exist in 3-dimensional space. At 0512 hours Zulu time, 45 minutes after the Blackbird had vanished from all tracking systems, the SR-71 suddenly reappeared on a WACS radar at an altitude of 34,000 feet and descending rapidly in an uncontrolled spiral approximately 890 miles southwest of its last known position, placing the aircraft over the Norwegian Sea, well outside Soviet territorial airspace. The AWACS controller immediately attempted radio contact and was shocked when Buchanan's voice came through the speakers, weak and disoriented, but unmistakably alive, reporting that they had experienced total electrical failure and were attempting to restart the engines using emergency procedures. What Strategic Air Command would piece together over the following weeks from satellite imagery radar tracks and the cryptic data recovered from the Blackbird's partially corrupted flight recorders painted a picture of an event that seemed to violate causality itself. During those 45 missing minutes, multiple defense satellites had recorded intense bursts of electromagnetic radiation emanating from a point in space approximately 340 miles above the Earth's surface, well into the thermosphere, where the SR-71 could never have possibly flown radiation signatures that matched the spectral analysis of the lights witnessed during previous encounters. At precisely 0509 hours, 3 minutes before the Blackbird reappeared on radar, a Soviet early warning station on the Kola Peninsula had transmitted an emergency alert reporting multiple high-altitude objects performing maneuvers at speeds exceeding 18,000 miles per hour before simultaneously accelerating upward and departing Earth's atmosphere entirely tracked by Soviet space surveillance radars until the objects reached an altitude of over 1,200 miles and vanished from detection. When the KC-135 tanker finally rendezvoused with the crippled Blackbird and guided Buchanan toward an emergency landing at Bodø Air Base in Norway, the tanker crew reported that the SR-71's titanium skin was covered in a fine crystalline frost that should not have been able to form at the aircraft's temperature and altitude, and that both engines were running but producing an unusual harmonic vibration that the experienced boom operator described as sounding almost like the turbines were trying to match a frequency they had been exposed to and couldn't quite replicate. Buchanan managed to land the aircraft safely, despite having almost no hydraulic pressure and minimal control authority, touching down on the Norwegian runway with such precision that the base commander would later comment, "It seemed like the plane was being guided by something beyond the pilot's own skill." When the canopy was opened and ground crew reached Buchanan and Yazzie, both men were found conscious but completely unresponsive, staring straight ahead with expressions of profound confusion, as if they had just woken from a dream they couldn't quite remember. their pressure suits soaked with sweat, despite the frigid cockpit temperature, and their pulse rates elevated to over 140 beats per minute, even though they were no longer in any immediate danger. Within 6 hours of the Blackbird's emergency landing, a team of Air Force Office of Special Investigations personnel arrived at Bodø Air Base aboard a specially configured C-141 Starlifter transport, accompanied by 2 individuals in civilian clothing who carried credentials identifying them as representatives of an organization at the Norwegian base commander had never heard of, and whose authority apparently superseded even Strategic Air Command. The SR-71 was immediately shrouded in camouflage tarps and loaded onto the C-141 using portable cranes. The entire operation conducted with such urgency that the Norwegian personnel were ordered to clear the area and were threatened with diplomatic consequences if they discussed anything they had witnessed. Buchanan and Yazzie were separated immediately and placed under medical observation in different isolated rooms, subjected to comprehensive physical examinations that revealed disturbing anomalies, including elevated levels of exotic particles in their bloodstream that suggested exposure to high-energy cosmic radiation, typically only encountered by astronauts during solar flare events, and unusual patterns of neural activity in their brain scans that neurology specialists described as resembling the synchronized firing patterns seen in advanced meditation states or near-death experiences. Both crew members reported fragmentary memories of the missing time that came in disjointed flashes. Buchanan recalled seeing the Earth from an impossible distance and angle, as if he had been observing from a point outside the planet's orbital plane, while Yazzie described a sensation of the Blackbird existing in multiple locations simultaneously and being able to perceive all of those locations at once in a way that human neurology wasn't designed to process. The flight data recorder that was recovered from the aircraft contained 127 minutes of recording, even though the entire mission from takeoff to landing had lasted only 6 hours and 18 minutes, according to ground tracking, suggesting that the Blackbird had experienced time dilation or had been operating in some region where time flowed at a different rate than normal spacetime. Most disturbing of all were the spectrographic analyses of the crystalline frost that had covered the aircraft, which when examined under electron microscopy revealed molecular structures that didn't correspond to any known form of water ice and contained trace elements, including isotopes of hafnium and tantalum, in ratios that don't occur naturally anywhere on Earth and are only produced artificially in particle accelerators or the cores of dying stars. Strategic Air Command issued immediate orders classifying the entire incident at a level above top secret, creating a new special access program designated Azure that required presidential authorization for anyone to be read into the details. And within 72 hours, every document recording radar track and piece of physical evidence related to the February 23rd incident had been consolidated at a classified facility that even most high-ranking military officers didn't know existed. The official record was altered to show that the SR-71 crew had experienced a routine electrical malfunction requiring an emergency landing, and both Buchanan and Yazzie were reassigned to administrative positions at separate Air Force bases with explicit written orders never to discuss their experience with anyone outside the special access program, orders that came with the clear implication that violation would result in federal prosecution and imprisonment. The official fate of the 4 crew members who directly encountered the hexagonal formations during February 1987 reads like a carefully orchestrated dismantling of their military careers in subsequent lives, each man processed through a system designed to isolate discredit and ultimately silence them. Major Thomas Kellerman was transferred to a desk position at Air Force Materiel Command Headquarters at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Within 3 weeks of his encounter, the physical evidence that was collected from both SR-71 incidents was transported to a classified storage facility buried deep beneath the Nevada Test and Training Range. Placed in hermetically sealed containers, and stored alongside other artifacts that the United States government has recovered over decades of encounters with phenomena that challenge conventional understanding of reality. The crystalline frost samples from Buchanan's aircraft were subjected to every analytical technique available to materials. Science revealing molecular structures that seemed to exist in quantum superposition states and contained what physicists described as impossible amounts of information encoded at the atomic level, as if each microscopic crystal was simultaneously a physical object and a data storage device using principles that human technology couldn't begin to replicate. Families of the 4 crew members were told various fabricated stories to explain the sudden career changes, medical retirements, and behavioral changes that their loved ones experienced. Narratives carefully constructed to make the men seem unstable or unreliable, while providing just enough official documentation to discourage further questions. Strategic Air Command quietly suspended all SR-71 reconnaissance missions over the Arctic Circle for 6 months, following the February incidents, resuming flights only after installing additional sensor packages and implementing new protocols that required crews to immediately disengage and return to base if they encountered any unexplained phenomena, effectively ceding that region of airspace to whatever intelligence operated there. The Azure Threshold Special Access Program remained active through the end of the Cold War and beyond, continuously collecting reports of similar encounters from military personnel worldwide and analyzing them for patterns that might reveal the origin, purpose, or nature of the hexagonal formations. What analysts discovered over 30 years of investigation was that the encounters followed a cyclical pattern tied to solar activity and aurora borealis intensity, suggesting that whatever created those geometric light formations either originated from or required specific electromagnetic conditions in Earth's upper atmosphere to manifest physically. The true scope of the phenomenon remains classified at the highest levels of government secrecy, but leaked documents that appeared briefly on obscure internet forums in 2019 before being scrubbed suggested that at least 47 military aircraft from 6 different nations have encountered identical hexagonal formations since 1943, with 12 of those encounters resulting in permanent disappearances of aircraft and crew that were officially attributed to accidents or hostile action. The SR-71 Blackbird program was terminated in 1998, officially for budget reasons, though some former Strategic Air Command personnel have privately suggested that the real reason was that the aircraft's ability to reach the edge of space had inadvertently made it the perfect platform for encountering entities that humanity was neither prepared to understand nor capable of defending against, and that continuing to probe those altitudes was inviting attention from intelligences that viewed our presence there as either a threat or an opportunity for continued study. Don't forget to follow our channel for more military encounters. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our investigations into phenomena that defy everything we've been taught about reality. And subscribe to join our community of truth seekers who refuse to accept official explanations that ignore overwhelming evidence.